Today's forum, Womenomics, the business and social cost of workplace policy, premieres a study of policy and the economic realities of women in the workplace. Today's forum is sponsored by Borns and Thornburg, the Women's Book, and the Columbus Dispatch, and is presented in partnership with the Women's Fund of Central Ohio. Let's thank our sponsors who have so generously supported us today. And now let's welcome and I'll introduce our speakers. Dr. Orie Kristel, the CEO of Illuminology and the author of the study, is behind me and soon to be at this podium. Nicole Dunn, President and CEO of the Women's Fund of Central Ohio. Dr. Mysheika Williams-Roberts, Assistant Health Commissioner and Medical Director of the Columbus Public Health Department, on the end. And Kelli, Gragasz, who's the Senior VP and Director of Private Banking at Fifth Third Bank. And our host and moderator next to me, Jerry Revish, you all know, of WBNS 10 TV. Orie will start us off with an overview of the study and its results. Orie, the podium is yours, and please welcome all of our speakers.
Good afternoon. I would like to start by thanking the Columbus Metropolitan Club for hosting today's conversation and all of you for participating in this conversation. We're all very glad to see you. I'd also like to thank the board of the Women's Fund of Central Ohio for their commitment to this issue and for spearheading this research. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge my collaborator on this research project, Gretchen Pattison. After the worst recession in generations, Americans are hearing more and more news of improving economic conditions in our country. And in many ways, there is encouraging news. The United States gross domestic product, which measures the total value of goods and services produced by the economy over a period of time, is growing again. New home sales are continuing to increase slowly. Auto sales are at their highest level since 2007. Major stock market indices like the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average are at record highs. And the national unemployment rate is continuing to decrease from its Great Recession highs. Many of these positive economic signs can also be observed here in Ohio. Just a few weeks ago, the Columbus Dispatch reported that Ohio's unemployment rate dipped to a post-recession low of 6.9% in January 2014. And just a few months ago, here at the Columbus Metropolitan Club, we heard economist Bill Lafayette predict a large increase in additional jobs in Central Ohio in 2014. However, Bill also noted the presence of dark clouds on the horizon, particularly with regard to the state of small businesses. I would advance his argument to say that these dark clouds may be bigger and wider than just those looming over small businesses. There are multiple signs that a large segment of people in our community are in economic distress. These warning signs suggest a significant disconnect between the positive economic indicators I mentioned earlier and what people are experiencing in their everyday lives, not only across America, but here in Central Ohio as well. In 2012, the United States Department of Agriculture listed Ohio as the 10th worst state for food insecurity, meaning at times during the year, 1 in 6 Ohio households were uncertain of having or were unable to acquire enough food to meet the needs of all their members because of insufficient money or not enough access to or resources for food. Here in Central Ohio, the Mid-Ohio Food Bank reported a 49% increase in demand over the past 5 years, answering over 160,000 food pantry requests each month. Warning signs are also seen when one looks at other basic household needs, like the need for safe and affordable shelter. Franklin County's Community Shelter Board recently reported a 65% increase in family homelessness since 2010, with more than 4,000 family members turning to the local emergency shelter system in fiscal year 2013. After a traumatizing national experience like the Great Recession, it makes sense that the news media and those who consume it would be interested in and pay attention to stories that suggest we're on our way back to more prosperous times. I'm sure most people would agree, however, that these stories do not reflect the full economic reality facing our community. For many Central Ohioans, economic challenges are causing severe hardship as householders attempt to meet their basic needs. Furthermore, I'd argue that there's an additional story underlying these data and trends, an important one that sometimes can be masked or ignored. I'm talking about how the current economic reality affects women in comparison to men. Some have called the 2000s the lost decade, with median earnings remaining flat or declining during this period. This was certainly the case here in Central Ohio. Now, when I say Central Ohio, I'm referring to the Columbus Metropolitan Statistical Area, which in 2012 included Delaware, Fairfield, Franklin, Licking, Madison, Morrow, Pickaway, and Union counties. From 2005 to 2012, the median inflation-adjusted amount of money earned annually by Central Ohio women who worked full-time decreased from about $42,700 to about $40,400. This decrease in women's median earnings is especially meaningful in light of the fact that women, even those working full-time, tend to earn less than men do. Over the same period, the earnings of men who worked full-time decreased from about $54,600 to about $51,500. Put another way, the difference in median annual earnings between Central Ohio women and men who were employed on a full-time basis in 2012 was about $11,000. This wage gap is apparent at the national, state, and local levels. Looking at women and men who are employed on a full-time basis, women's median annual earnings continue to lag behind men's earnings at about 81%. In Central Ohio in 2012, women who were employed on a full-time basis had median annual earnings that were 78% of men's. And this is the same percentage that it was back in 2005. Turning to the issue of poverty, in 2012, 16% of Central Ohio females, about 151,000 residents, lived in a household that had an annual income that was below the federal poverty level. This percentage and this number are higher than the statistics for Central Ohio males. Furthermore, the percentage of Central Ohio females under age 18 who lived in a household with an income below the federal poverty level increased from 16% in 2005 to 21% in 2012. As we reviewed these data, it was clear that a significant number of Central Ohio women and girls were faced by severe economic challenges, perhaps disproportionately so. And like other researchers before us, it seemed apparent that the federal poverty guidelines didn't fully capture the extent to which households were economically insecure. What do I mean by economically secure? We operationalized or defined economic security as households in which there was sufficient income to meet the household's basic needs, which includes housing, childcare, healthcare, transportation, food, taxes, and other necessities such as clothing and personal care items and services. Ideally, these economically secure households would not require financial assistance from familial, communal, or governmental sources. If we were going to estimate the number of households that did not have sufficient income to fund their basic expenses, we of course needed to estimate what those basic expenses might be. To do this, we computed basic needs budgets for different types of Central Ohio households. These basic needs budgets had line items for housing, childcare, food, and so forth. For each of these line items, we used monthly dollar amounts published by federal and state sources that were applicable here for Central Ohio, as well as data compiled by 2 national think tanks. In all, we computed 19 different basic needs budgets for different types of households here in Central Ohio. For example, a single woman living alone in Central Ohio in 2012 would have a monthly basic needs budget of about $1,700 or $20,600 annually. This is 185% of the federal poverty level for a single person household. On a weekly basis, she would need to work 40 hours a week and receive an hourly wage of $9.91 to meet this budget. Of course, Ohio's current minimum wage for non-tipped employees is about $2 less. How about a married couple with 1 child? This household would have a monthly basic needs budget of about $3,600 or $42,800 annually. This is 224% of the federal poverty level for a 3-person household. To meet this budget, both of the adults would need to work 40 hours a week and receive an hourly wage of $10.30. Here's another example. A single mother with 2 children here in Central Ohio in 2012 would have a monthly basic needs budget of about $3,800 or $46,000 annually. This is 242% of the federal poverty level. On a weekly basis, she would need to work 40 hours a week and receive an hourly wage of over $22 to meet this budget. One of the highest expenses in these latter 2 basic needs budgets is the cost of childcare. These costs represent over 30% of the basic budget for a woman of 2 children. In Ohio in 2012, the annual cost of center-based childcare for 1 infant and 1 preschooler was $15,600. Current estimates suggest that a Central Ohio household with 2 children aged 3 years apart would spend a staggering $140,000 in center-based care through age 12. With these basic needs budgets in hand, we then obtained data from the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey for the Columbus area in 2012, the most recent year that raw data were available. We then estimated the number of households in Central Ohio with incomes less than what their basic needs budgets would call for. In Central Ohio in 2012, more than 1 in 4 single or married female householders were not economically secure. Put another way, about 160,000 Central Ohio households that were led or co-led by women had an income that was less than its basic needs budget. Our estimate of economically insecure single or married female householders in Central Ohio is more than double the number of single or married female householders that are below the official poverty threshold. The statistics are even more alarming when we focus on those households that have one female adult leading it. Nearly 1 in 2 Central Ohio households led by single females had an annual income that was less than its basic needs budget in 2012. This translates to about 100,000 households here in Central Ohio. With these findings as context, my colleagues will now talk about the implications of this research and perhaps some possible solutions.
Thank you, Orie. Some really startling, sobering statistics there of a problem that's right here in our midst in our city. And we want to unpack some of that with this great panel today. Nicole, Kelli, and Mysheika, as we get into this, give me a sense of why it's important to you that we have this gender disparity conversation. Nicole.
You're looking at me, so I'm going to start. First, I want to thank you, Jerry and Dr. Kristel, for being part of the work and the conversation, because it's not just a gender issue, it's a community piece, and that's what you're getting at. I'm also going to ask that you indulge me for a minute by thanking you for being here, and March is Women's History Month, so I'm breaking the rules here and just kind of taking over for a moment, and then I'm going to back into your answer. So with it being Women's History Month, I just want to take a minute to quote Gloria Steinem. Women have always been an equal part of the past. We just haven't been an equal part of history. So as you breathe that in, continue to think about, in answering your question, that women make up 51% of the population, 58% of the workforce. So for those that may not know math, that's a little more than half. Yet equally, but are not equally represented at the decision-making tables. Less than 25% of elected officials are female. But now let's flip the other side again, that 70% of consumer decisions are made by females. So what triggered me with your question is, what hooks me is the conversation about it being a disparity. And what I'd like to challenge us to have is more of a conversation that suggests a gender lens conversation and not focusing on the compare, contrast, the difference between, and really look at and take a look at what happens when you pick an issue, economic security, apply a gender filter to it, and say, is there possibility to peel back layers of an onion, to ask the question, is it unique if we look at it with a gender lens? Is there an effect or an issue that could have opportunity, experience, and access to a different outcome of solutions if we looked at it with a gender lens? And it may not. The answer could be no, it really doesn't matter. But I think what Dr. Kristel shared with us is that the data is actually quite compelling. You'll see in one of the items on your table that we can have, if women received equal pay alone, the U.S. economy would produce $447 billion in additional income. So just in that one line item, and so what does that mean? So that could cut the poverty rate in half for working women and their families, right? So last fall, we also hosted Katie Koch, who is the chief of staff to the chairman of Goldman Sachs in the UK. She was charged with her strategy team to identify what would be the most significant factor for GDP growth in emerging countries. Goldman Sachs has nothing to do with women's issues, except for in this one matter, because they want to make money, and the research came back that said if you invest in social change for women and girls, simply by investing in a gender-specific solution, you can change an economic climate of an entire country. So to me, when I hear the basic needs budget, and when I look at other work that's going on, because this is just the beginning, we're elevating awareness and educating and figuring out what are those solutions. And is it a gender issue? It is. Women are often the primary caregiver to children. So the lack of security or self-sufficiency in order to thrive affects our economy, it affects our workforce, and it affects our children. So in this conversation, I want us to think about, as it affects then the experiences of women, so goes children, our schools, and how our community and economy can thrive. That's more than one reason why I
Thank
think
you.
it's important.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Kelli?
I think probably my input comes from the corporate setting. I think I work obviously for a company, Fifth Third Bank, and we are in that financial marketplace. And for us, we have those clients that are women, and we want to be sure that the financial literacy conversation is happening and that women feel comfortable in the household decision-making that's happening. To Nicole's point, those decisions are happening. Women are making those decisions. So the more educated and the more strength that they have behind the reasons that they're making the decisions that they're making is going to be important for not only the community, but for corporations like the one that I work for. We have to recognize that those folks are out there. We need to market towards women. We need to be sure that the conversations are including women. My employees need to be sure that they're looking women in the eye when they have these conversations and not just focusing their conversations on the men in the room. So those types of issues are happening inside of organizations like mine. But what the deeper meaning, I think, for me is that, when you have a woman that understands the budgeting, understands what's happening as far as what she's signing when she's signing her tax returns, what she's putting into her 401k on a monthly basis, and how that's going to impact her and her future and her career. I think when she walks into her annual review each year and asks the question about, hey, isn't it time for me to get a raise? Or, I see that position is opened and you may not have thought of me, but I'm very interested in accepting a promotion. That's where I see myself 5 years from now. So just being comfortable enough and having the strength of character and getting the support that she needs in the community and from her home and from her employer to raise her hand and say, hey, I'm not quite sure I understand how this impacts me, but I need some help, or could you walk through this with me? And so that's why it's important, I think, to get the conversation out there and make sure that people aren't embarrassed to ask questions about their finances and get the help that they need when they need it.
Thanks, Kelli. Dr. Roberts?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I think the statistics are sobering. And unfortunately, it's information that we at the health department look at all the time. We look at disparities, whether it's among gender, among race, among sexual orientation. So we look at these daily, and we are always thinking of how we can do better to make our community healthy. I think as a woman leader in this community, and all of us here, it's our responsibility to address the issues that impact our families. And obviously, economics impact our health. We know that with more money, with health insurance, you have access to health care, access to health services that those who don't have those resources will not be able to access. And when you look at women who aren't able to access health care, particularly when you look at women of childbearing age, then it also affects our children, and our children are our future. So through the course of this conversation today, you're going to hear me talk a lot about a woman's health and our children's health and the importance of bringing healthy children into our community. And you're going to hear me talk about infant mortality, which is a huge initiative for us at the health department right now. And I think one of the reasons why that we were asked to be a part of this conversation as we talk about economy, women, and health. So I'm glad to be here, and I think it's an important conversation that we have to have.
It is, and thank you, Doctor. I appreciate that. Let me ask this to Kelli. What are some public policy, workplace policies that can help women succeed?
I think in general, I'll tell you a little bit about probably my personal story, just because that's probably the best way for me to talk about this. I came to Fifth Third right out of college, so I was a college graduate and came to Columbus actually from the University of Kansas, and came here thinking I had a job that I didn't end up getting. I was on my 4th interview and thought, of course I'm going to get this job. So moved here thinking that things were going to be a little different than they ended up being, and ended up not getting the job that I thought I was going to get. So gosh, where am I going to go? I'm back to square one with this nice college education that my parents paid for graciously enough. So I ended up applying to be a teller at Fifth Third Bank, and had experience. I'd worked my way through college as a bank teller in Kansas. And so when I went to the bank with a college education, applying for a job that didn't necessarily require a college education, and making a very low wage. At the time, I think I was at the minimum wage, which, you know, that 20 years ago wasn't quite where it is today. But so I had to figure out a way to make that work for me. So the beauty of what I did, and I didn't necessarily, I fell into it by getting the job at Fifth Third. But the beauty of that is by working for an organization that's very forward-thinking in their workplace policies. And some of those things that have helped me get to where I am today are things like paid time off, health insurance, promote from within policies. So some of the policies that you wouldn't traditionally think about are very, they're going to help both men and women in the workplace. Men are going to take advantage of paid time off just like women will. But what tends to happen is when you start talking about those childbearing years and the women that you hire into your corporation, and you look at them and you think, oh gosh, am I going to really focus my spending, my education dollars, my continuing education, my promotions on this woman who may or may not come back after she decides to have a child? You know, I think the lens that women in the corporate environment, in the workplace in general, is really, you don't necessarily mean to discriminate, but it just, unfortunately, it's something that you have to make good decisions for your business. So fortunately for me, I was able to take time off work, have children, and come back with not only my job still intact, but the ability to get promoted from within. I had a personal tragedy occur. I lost my first son back in 1993, and at that point in time, 1999, I started with a company in 1993. So I had about 6 years under my belt with Fifth Third Bank when this horrible thing happened to me and my family. And I remember thinking, am I ever going to be able to go back to work and continue doing what I'm doing? I mean, my world, you know, your world changes, obviously, when something like that happens. So the fact that I was able to take the time away from work that I needed, come back and have a community and a workplace that supported me through a very difficult personal time, as well as health insurance and time away pay that was able to get me through that, and then not be looked at differently. And then people kind of put their arms around me and said, many of my male, at the time I had a male manager, and basically reached out to me and said, you know, we're going to be here for you. We're going to get you through this. This is going to work. And whatever time that you need, take that time away. It'll work out. So that was very, very important to me. And I think that when I continued in my career and continued at Fifth Third, continued to have more children, the ability for them to have flexible work arrangements for me. When I had then ended up having twin boys who were premature and obviously very concerned about their health when they were born, and still working full time, and had a boss, one of my sponsors, and another male boss of mine, who said, you know what, Kelli, we trust that you need to do what's right for your family now. Take the flexible time that you need. Stay at home in the mornings. Get your kids off to where they need to go. Help get them to the point where you're comfortable coming back to work full time. I'm going to let you work out of the house. It may not have been a written policy of the company, but it was something that he had the managerial flexibility really to say, and my company allowed that to happen, to say, you know, go ahead and do what you need to do, because we trust that when you come back, you're going to be as good of an employee, if not better, because we believed in you. And I think that's where women, the policies that in the workplace that really surround women, we appreciate those flexibility. We appreciate those schedules. And so if somebody trusting in us and believing in us, that's going to only help the corporation. The profitability is going to be there because the organization believed in allowing for that woman in particular to have that flexibility.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Nicole, you were nodding your head in agreement with a lot of what you heard there. And talk to me about workplace policy. Where do you think the work ought to be focused now?
Wow, that's like the silver bullet. Like, where should it focus on? One finite thing for economic security in the workplace. I think it really takes from what I was nodding with Kelli is just the awareness and wherewithal to say, okay, let's take a look at it. Let's at least be curious about the conversation. As I first said, just apply a gender lens and see what's happening. Is there an opportunity to at least do an assessment and say, does it matter that X number of our employees in the C-suite executive roles are not, male-female ratio? What is our promotional standard and evaluation of What is the ratio of those? Who are the recruitments that are coming in? And are we looking at a balanced slate of employees? And does that matter for your work culture? For me, I think it's focusing in, to answer your question, just to start to ask the question and see what bubbles up. Ask the question, is there equal pay? If you looked across the board at all managers and anybody at the mid-manager level and say, is there equal opportunity for promotion, professional development? That's what I was seeing there in nodding to Kelli, is just the investment into the current employees. Because the current employee today hopefully is retained later for the company to thrive and have a return on investment. And if that is a woman that's in childbearing years, is there an off-ramp, on-ramp ability for her to come in, step in, and have the connection and engagement with the employer to say, hey, this is what you missed during your 6 weeks or 6 months if you're in Europe, of maternity leave. We're going to onboard you right where you left off, jump in and help you rather than spend the money on hiring and training new recruits. So
Thank you.
ask the questions.
Dr. Roberts, you see the impact of disparity in workplace policy when it comes to women. Talk to us a little bit more about that.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about some policies on a larger level, whether it be a federal level or regional level or local level. And one of them obviously is the Affordable Care Act. And there are many aspects of the Affordable Care Act that many of us don't recognize, but one I want to bring to your attention is the women's preventive care aspect. So one of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act is your health plan has to provide women with mammograms, cervical cancer screening, prenatal care, and well woman care at little to no charge to the patient. That's huge. Before, even people who had health insurance had a very high deductible that they had to pay. So even though their doctor might have scheduled their mammogram, they couldn't afford to pay the deductible to get that done. So what does that mean for our women here in our community? I mentioned earlier that we have an infant mortality problem in our community. What is infant mortality? Infant mortality is the death of a baby before their first birthday. Here in our community, here in Franklin County specifically, we have about 150 babies that die each year before they get to their first birthday. That's 5 kindergarten classes that never will occur. So with the Affordable Care Act, we know that women now have access to prenatal care and well woman care. Well, what does that really mean? When we look at the babies that die and we go back and look at some of their causes of death and what impacts their death, one of the things we've learned is that the woman is not healthy before she gets pregnant. So with that provision of the Affordable Care Act, we will now have better access to health care for well women who are planning to have babies or not sure if they're going to have babies so that they can be in the best condition possible for when they do decide to get pregnant and have a baby. So that will lower our infant mortality rates tremendously. Another policy that Kelli mentioned briefly was paid time off or paid sick days. The state of Connecticut was the first to mandate that all employers provide paid sick time to their workers. That can have a huge benefit. As we've said, that women are often the caregivers of their children. So when their children are sick, who stays home with the kids? It's usually the mom or the woman of the household. I can tell you personally, when I was growing up, my mom was a single mom. She was a school nurse. She had exhausted most of her leave time because both her parents had been sick and had died over the course of about 6 or 7 years. So when my sister and I would get sick, we would go to work with her. We would get on one of the cots. She'd tell us to go to the back and get on one of the cots. I have no idea what she told her employer. But it worked. It worked for her, it worked for us, and it was the way that she could provide care for her child who was sick and still go to work without missing a day's pay. So paid sick time is important, and we need to think about that with our own employees here. And the last policy that I just want to talk about is quality child care, affordable quality child care. Many women choose not to go back to work after they've had a child because they can't afford the child care. We know that if you provide child care on site, that helps not only women but men. They come to work on time, they're able to stay at work longer, and they're more likely to show up at work if they have child care either on site or good quality child care elsewhere. We also know that there's like Title 20 provisions that allow individuals to get affordable child care who can't otherwise afford it. But we also know that only 30% of low-income families actually are able to use that child care. So that is an issue in our community, and that's an issue that I know many are working hard to improve, but we have to keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. We're going to be taking questions from the audience in a few minutes. That microphone you see standing there is the one you'll come to and state your name and your question when we get to that. We don't want to leave here today without something that we can do as individuals to affect some change here. What do you think the community can be doing to help make this better? Nicole?
I think the community is already on the right track, honestly. It's I sat here, 6 months ago and listened to the benchmark study. I know that the work that Matt Habash is doing with the Mid-Ohio Food Bank over the last 3 years is disrupting what was a food pantry to actually looking at the cycle of poverty. The more that we can have conversations such as that, or I have the honor to serve, and it is to serve and work towards the solutions on the infant mortality task force. And it's an incredible process to see how you can unwind something that is so complex and big and say, okay, this is your thread and this is your thread, but it all comes back to a spoke in the middle. So the more that conversations like this can happen, and I love that it's a filled house today on a really bad weather day during a spring break month. And so thank you for being here, because each of you can think about go back to your employer, look at your household structure. What is your children's school, if you have children? What are their school hours? Start having the conversations, and even at the PTO level, our school structure is not set up for 2 household working parents. You know, my children go to the bus at 8:30 and get off at 4:10. Well, I'm at work before then and I'm at work after then. So it's not set up for a working household. So there's a lot of places that just start where you are, and if we all start and ask the question, where do you navigate your day? And ask that question of, okay, what is my basic needs budget? What does this mean for a family of 1 or 2 children? And what does it mean if it's a 2-household family or a single? And just raise your awareness and participate in conversations and work towards solutions. And I love that this is the last question, because that's where we need to stay. We can have the statistics, and now that we have it for local, we have no more excuses to say, oh, but that's the national. That's not happening in Columbus. Right? We're innovative, we're cutting edge, we are desperately striving to be open and creative and entrepreneurial, and we're the leaders, and we are, but we have to bring the entire community with us as we move forward.
Kelli, and you can bring in your corporate experience if you care.
I would say that, you know, I mentioned this a little bit previously, but companies need to realize not only the policies that they have internally that are helping their women employees succeed, but their clients, you know, those clients, those decision makers, those purchasers. Studies show that women spend, I think it's something, or you can challenge me here if I'm wrong, but I think 87% of a woman's pay goes back towards the community and the family. It's almost the exact opposite for men. And so you just need to, so sorry. Sorry, men, they like to spend their money on alcohol and tobacco, I think is what we figured out, but I wasn't gonna say that, but so truth hurts. I think it's important for companies like mine to realize that, you know, the women are the ones making the decisions when it comes to where to spend their dollars. So focusing your product selection, focusing your marketing efforts, focusing your the things that you offer to the community are going to be important. You know, not only is it a moral conversation that we women love to be involved in and help change, but it's a bottom line conversation. And I think if you focus on the decisions that you're making as a corporation, getting women in the boardroom, getting women in the management and the executive suites, again, more studies will show you that the Fortune 500 companies that have had the forethought to get women on their boards or women in their executive suites are much more profitable when it comes to the bottom line than those that have not had that diversity of thought around the decision making.
Doctor?
I would like to focus on the minimum wage. We know that nationally, 2/3 of those earning minimum wage are women, yet these same women are often the sole breadwinners of their household. And we also know that until recently, these women didn't have access to health insurance, but because of the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion, many of these women will now have access to health insurance. We talk about poverty a lot in this community. We talk about it at the health department. I want to give you a number, some statistics about life expectancy. We've been looking at life expectancy of those in our community. And you'll be startled to know this, but a life expectancy of a woman today living in New Albany is she's expected to live until she's 86 years of age. The life expectancy of a woman who lives in Franklinton is expected to live until she's 69 years of age. That's a 17-year gap. That's huge. So what's the difference? What's the difference between that woman in New Albany and that woman in Franklinton? It's the basic needs, it's the income, it's the housing structure, it's the education that she has. We as a community have to do better with that. And I think one way we can do that is looking at the minimum wage, so more of our women are earning more, and we can bring up that life expectancy so all of us can have a long life expectancy.
Thanks so much, all three of you. Now we want to open up the floor to your questions. It's our tradition here to take these questions. I want you to step to the mic, state your name, and ask your question, and avoid any editorial comment today. Please.
Hi, I'm Wendy Bortz, and whenever I hear about affordable childcare, I wonder about the paradox that we're in with women, and that we want women to have lower costs of childcare in order to go to work, and yet, 85% of your brain is developed by age 5. I think we're realizing more and more how important early childhood education is, and that is currently being provided by women at very low salaries. And I just wonder, what solutions there are to that.
Ladies, I'd like to grab this.
Well, I have to admit I'm not an expert in early childhood education. I know we have great leaders in our community that focus on that. I don't know what the solution is, but I know it's something that we have to focus on in order to help our children for our future, but also in order to help our workforce right now. So I don't know if anyone has.
The only suggestion that I want to offer, and it's not intended to be a cop-out as much as when I sit in these conversations, most often it's of the service providers themselves, it's nonprofit organizations, it's the tax exempt, but many childcare centers are for-profit, they're businesses, and that's okay. So what I want to get at is the access to childcare, and is there a role for employers to play? Is there a role in talent management in the human resource department to examine, what is the employee retention, how many employees have children, and would it behoove them to, address or look at community development opportunities that if it's not within the actual employer but in the downtown capital area, just giving an example, in that general vicinity, how many working parents are there that would take advantage of that if it were offered? So often the choice becomes, is it affordable or is it accessible? Oftentimes you have to choose between the two. And do you choose the child care center that's close to home or work? Or do you risk taking an extra hour in your day to drive to the one that's quality, but then you're losing the time to get to work on time or to pick up the child on the back end of the workday? So I think it's changing up the players who have been part of this conversation for the last 20 years, the 2 decades, because it's got to change.
Thanks for your question. Next question.
Barbara Fergus. For all of you, we're a city of statistics and white papers and consultants ad nauseum, and a lot of good comes out of it, no doubt. Kelli, you talked about how Fifth Third has stepped up to the plate for you. I assume then for the rest of the women within your constituency. Have we ever, as a community, looked at those corps that are in and around the Central Ohio area, and which ones are women and girls friendly oriented? Have we ever done that kind of study? And if we haven't, don't you think we should celebrate them?
Well, I'll start that, and then maybe Nicole. I know that initially Fifth Third helped underwrite a portion of the study that we're sharing today, with the idea that this is not a one-time discussion. I think it does start with getting the basics, getting the kind of baseline information out there regarding women in the community. But I think our hope as a corporation in particular is that this conversation will continue to happen, and as we continue the conversation, we'll look more at the women in the corporations and the equal pay issue and the executive suites and the boards. So we see it as more of a base to build on, and I think that's kind of the hope here. I do not think there has been I can tell you from experience, as it's something that we've looked at, where where do you see the information about the executive women, who's out there, who's hiring them, who has them on the board, and it's not published information, at least not here in Central Ohio currently.
Yeah, Barbara, I would echo that I don't know if that has been done, and if it has, then I apologize for not knowing that, because I know that we've done the tally count, and that's been something that I've struggled with, is that we often will count the women in C-suites, we'll count the women on boards, but then I ask the question, well, how many of them are working moms? Those that are getting that work done, those that are actually the influence makers, what's happening where there can be change created? And I sit in conversations with, different corporate executives about starting or building the momentum of their women's networks and their women's initiatives within their companies. And it's fascinating to me that there's this, usually a group, a conglomerate that's wanting to find momentum, but it's one woman who's on the executive leadership team who says that just because I'm the woman, I can't do it alone. It's like I'm tapped just because of my gender, that, oh, you care about the women's stuff, okay, that's covered. So I think you're right that digging a little deeper to figure out where are those successes. I think of, Cardinal Health is a huge investor into the Women's Fund just because we have a priority initiative or priority area of women's leadership. It's something that they're putting the stake in the ground, and they're looking around saying, who else is doing this, so we can build that momentum and that connection across different industries and arenas. So that's,
I'm not sure that that's been done locally, but I do know there have been national studies, and some of our local companies have been highlighted on some of those national lists.
Ohio Health is, always on the top list for Working Moms magazine, but a collective resource locally to have the local data doesn't sound like it's done.
Thank you. Next question, please. Thank you.
Thanks. Nice to see all of you here today. Thanks for being here. First, a little bit of a comment and definitely a question in here. My name's Betsy McCabe. I'm with the Women's Leadership Council of Central Ohio, and I love how we're talking about the impact that raising the minimum wage would have on women and their families. One of the things, we have an advocacy committee that's focused on public policy, and one of the things that really concerns my members is that there are so many programs in place that disincentivize women from getting that promotion, from getting to that next step, because when she's just, okay, now we're going to take away your health care subsidies. Now we're going to take away your food stamp benefits, that kind of thing. So as a community, how can we raise awareness about that kind of benefit cliff and the fact that women are penalized for trying to move ahead? What can we do about that? Do you have any suggestions? Bring awareness, advocacy around those issues? Because this is me personally. I think there's a mythology around poverty that people in poor are lazy. And in my personal experience, that is not what I see on a day-to-day basis through my work through United Way. So any ideas?
Thank you.
I think I was surprised at when we started looking into this about what a huge gap there is between when you're starting to talk about raising the minimum wage and what that may actually mean in reality for working women, and some of the things that they may end up not being able to benefit from. I think this discussion in particular, number one, this discussion in particular is focused on those women who just need a hand up, and they're not interested in continuing to get the handout. So the handout needs to be there for now, but the long-term focus of corporations and communities needs to be, how do we get these women to a point where they can earn a living wage and it's not going to be detrimental to their families. So, but then to your point, how do you get over that gap in the meantime? And I think that's where it comes into a discussion of getting more women involved in policy discussions. I think there's been many studies done all across the world, and you don't necessarily think about the United States being having these types of poverty discussions, but unfortunately we do have those gaps where we need to think about our public policy and how we kind of have a step down from people that are using these resources currently, and how do we get them, how do we give them a comfortable way of transitioning from utilizing many of these benefits to not utilizing many of those benefits. But I think a lot of that is get more women to run for office, get more women involved in the conversation, have those public policies looked at by a wide variety of people from many socioeconomic conditions, not necessarily having just, people that are well off have the ability to sit in public office, that it costs a lot of money to run for office. How do we assure that we get people in there that have had these experiences that can help write these laws and these policies that we're living with every day?
Yeah, I would definitely echo Kelly in terms of the policy aspect of things need to change. It's very frustrating. I know when I talk to my colleagues who are working with these individuals and, you know, a woman gets a job and then she loses some of her WIC benefits. And so then where is she with food? And then she's going to a food bank to get food because she doesn't have, so it's a cycle and we've got to fix it. And policy is one way, but also we've got to empower our women who are in the system to really encourage them to work themselves out of the system. So I think there's two approaches that we have to do.
I don't have much to add other than to continue to echo the policy change and to look for what is the opportunity for intervention cost. So if you're looking at workforce development, are you doing it at a time when women can access it? Or is it a time when there is no childcare offered? And so if it is in the evening, make sure that there's free childcare provided, transportation stipends, and is there food provided? So there's a cost to advance. And so if you can remedy those direct costs, then you can advance women in the workforce, and therefore the equal pay can continue to thrive.
Thank you. We're going to take 2 more questions.
Thank you. My name is Christy Meyer. I really appreciate this discussion. I am fortunate enough to have a lot of those policies at my workplace, and I'm very thankful for that. But my question is, what about the women that don't? You talk about looking through the lens of determining whether or not these policies and pay are equal. But that usually would be something in management that they would do, not somebody that may be down in the ranks. Like, how would an employee have that discussion with their employer?
Well, I think that one of the suggestions, and to your point, it's you're talking about many small businesses that are being challenged right now in many different ways. The economy is, it's very tough on small businesses. So, so for those corporations that are out there that have these workplace policies, good for them. I think if you're looking around the room and you have larger corporations that don't have these policies, that's the easy place to start. And I think that's they're going to be the largest employers. They're going to have the most impact quickly. However, for a smaller employer that doesn't necessarily have to meet certain legal obligations when it comes to these types of policies, I think what I encourage, again, is getting together with a group of like-minded women and really having an open discussion and in a place that you're comfortable having it, and being able to have the discussion about, tell me about your experience, who's someone that has supported you, talking about mentoring, sponsoring, having those open dialogue conversations with women such as yourself who are interested in social change, getting involved with the funds, people like the Women's Fund, where discussions like this are happening on a regular basis, and just educating yourself, whether it's online, looking at what other organizations are doing, and picking one thing that really would make a difference in your life in particular, and I don't mean you in particular, but each woman needs to pick one thing that's really going to make a difference in her career and the benefits that she's bringing home to her family, and just take that one thing and just go back, have a conversation with people, talk to your boss about it, talk to your boss's boss about it, bring it up in conversation. I think it's just a matter of starting the conversation and doing the research on why it would be important for your workplace to implement this policy. Have the statistics. Did you know that if you gave people paid time off that, the employee engagement levels are going to go up, whatever percent, and by employee engagement levels going up, that means workplace profitability goes up. So just having one thing that you're passionate about and just really talking about it is important.
Great. One more question.
Hi, my name's Rebecca Howard. I work at Nationwide Insurance, and just want to say I too lost a child while I was working, and suddenly, and my company was amazing at supporting me and giving me the time to take, so you'll have to pry me away from them at some point if I really wanted to leave. But my question is, how can you had stated in this room, how do we help people that are younger than us that are coming in, women into workplace? And one of the things that I've found is, and I saw this statistic, I can't remember where, but when looking at jobs and the description for that position, women look at it and say, I've never done that, so I can't apply for it. And men look at it and say, I've never done that, but I can. And there's a difference in attitude. So when I went and looked at mentors, I have a mentoring board, and one of them is specifically a man that helps me when I go for a promotion, look at that and tell me, yes, apply for it, and then here's how you need to negotiate, and here's how we do it. And I think that looking at women helping each other, but also looking at men and finding what is it that you guys have been doing that you're so successful at looking at those promotions, looking at negotiating for a salary, and then how do I take that and help other women that I work with or that I'm mentoring. So just a thought there, and what's your perspective on that?
I think that's a great question. One of the things that you'll see in the insert too is talking about education, and Dr. Roberts hit on it, and I mentioned it very briefly, but recognizing that whether it's infant mortality and recognizing that it starts with the mother, 10, 15, 20 years before conception. We're talking about education and inspiring in young girls that it matters. And we did research 3 years ago on called One Girl, and that in 5th grade and 8th grade, those are intersecting points to say, yeah, you can show up. So it starts really young. So if you have a young girl in your life, talk to her, ask her what she's interested in, and help her get through any barriers, or think about things that she's never thought about before, whether it is in STEM or math or science or anything that she can do. And then commend you on finding your board of directors and mentors, and because that's where it starts. And what can you do to pass that on? Find the young woman that you see is going to be that shining star, and just stay with her. Be her partner, be on that path, be on that journey, and just, I had a boss at United Way who, it was like every 3 months, it was, here's a job. It's like, you want that one? I'm like, do you not want me to work here? It's like, no, I just know you're not going to stay, so I want to make sure that this opportunity's out there. The thought was never even in my head, 1, to leave, or 2, to take something that would appear as a promotion on paper. But just to have that open dialogue to say that I believe in you, there's something more for you, and what do we need to do to keep you hitting that target? So if you can stay in the space of what's not happening, and it's like, oh, let's do more of this, and keep making more of that happen. Make those connections and build that support system. So you're doing the right things. Keep doing it. Do more of it.
I'd say also those women that are in managerial roles, really considering who you're hiring. I think we have to, once we've gotten there, we have to be sure that we're reaching back and we're hiring women, and we're not necessarily, we're forcing our recruiting department to maybe work a little harder. So I think that's important. I think, getting more comfortable with teaching not only our daughters, but the women in our office, what it means to be confident and why confidence can pay dividends in so many different respects. But just being able to look someone in the eye and being able to shake their hand. I have a 6-year-old daughter at home, and the other night I went out to an event and met many, many people, and just how frustrated I get with how men shake women's hands, and how sometimes it's just, they just don't quite know how soft or firm, is it this, is it this? And so we were reading our good night story, and I said, well, before we go to bed tonight, I'm going to give you a kiss and a hug, and we're also going to do some handshaking classes. So we so we did a little bit of that, but I think it's really the confidence to be able to go up to that man in the office, because they want to help. I mean, they want their companies to be successful. They want to get more decisions more women around the table. It's just a matter of having the confidence to ask and just go up and introduce yourself and just kind of getting over that one hump, I think.
And I think it's important to have diversity in your mentors, so not just gender diversity, but also their background, their work background. I mean, to have a mentor that has the job that you might aspire to be one day is great, but having a mentor that does something completely different can teach you a lot as well.
What a great discussion. How about a round of applause for our panel? Dr. Kristel, thank you. Carol Miller now.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for being here today and for moderating this panel. I understand we each have at our table a copy.
There's 2 of that report, and that's a draft. There's going to be some revisions with updated numbers even by this afternoon.
All right, then may I ask the question of, for those of you who are interested in getting the revised version of this, how would anyone here go about doing that?
Looking for Beth Lonn. Will it be on our website by the end of the day?
So the website, Nicole, is?
womensfundcentralohio.org. It's everything but the of. So womensfundcentralohio.org. Give us at least 4 to 5 hours to get that uploaded, because our good researcher keeps sending us new census numbers and finding little tweaks to something. So the perfection.
That's great. I hope you'll all take advantage of the offer to avail yourselves of the information that's contained in this study. And before we go to the lobby to continue this conversation, I'm very proud. Is there anybody from City Council here in the audience? Well, on behalf of the Columbus Metropolitan Club, I would love to thank City Council, who, in recognition of our organization, which, as Jane announced early in the meeting, was founded by a group of very forward-thinking women, Columbus City Council will be honoring CMC with a commendation in honor of Women's History Month at the March 24th City Council meeting. So I applaud you. Thank you so very much. I hope that you have found today's forum to be informative and compelling. And remember that you can see it again on Columbus TV3, on the Ohio Channel on WOSU, and share it on YouTube through the CMC website. Once more, let's thank our sponsors, Barnes & Thornburg, the Women's Book, and the Columbus Dispatch, and our partner, the Women's Fund of Central Ohio. And let's also thank our speakers, Orie Kristel, Nicole Dunn, Dr. Mysheika Williams-Roberts, Kelli Gragasz, and of course our moderator, who is now sitting down, Jerry Revish. And I thank you all for being here.